Cord to this computer. Okay, we're ready to go. I think I'm recording. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And those who live in the present moment, wherever you are in the world tonight, this is Grant Cameron. I'm talking to you from Canada. And in Canada, we claim that we invented football, basketball, and hockey. The Americans may dispute it, but look it up. We've got all three. And in the early days when my son played hockey 25 years ago, 30 years ago, he used to collect the hockey cards. And hockey's big in Canada. And we had a hockey card series called the Young Guns. And it was the rookie cards, because the rookie cards are the ones that are worth all the money. And so in your Topps card, your big, I think they just sold the Mickey Mantle rookie card for $12 million. So they had a series called the Young Guns. And so it would be the first year, the first draft choices from each of the teams, hoping that they would be worth piles of money in the future. And so in the UFO field, for many years, I would go along, and you'd notice that there was basically, it would be a Caucasian audience and all sorts of old people, and there was never any young people in the crowd. And so a couple of years back, we had a situation where the Wilson Leak document came out, and there was a bunch of young researchers who came up and had discovered no, it wasn't the Wilson Leak document. It was the Kit Green document, the Kit Green audio. And I got this audio and I put it on the internet, and I was talking to my guest today, and he told me who it was that the Kit Green was talking to was Kay Randall May. And I'm actually going to release a video that I did. She did a reading for me back in April. I'm going to release the actual video. And they told me it was Kay Randall May, and I was so amazed. I thought, holy cow, how did these guys figure out who this woman was? And so I called these guys the Young Guns. And it was like sort of in recognition of the fact that we now have a new generation that's going to take over the field of UFOs, and hopefully he's going to find an answer for us. And I have two young guns on with me today. The first I want to introduce is my a girl who helps me quite a bit, an assistant of mine, Nicole Sakach from the land of Lincoln in Illinois. And how are you doing, Nicole?
I'm doing well. I'm so happy to be here today with you guys.
Yeah, well, and I'm old, so I'm happy to be anywhere. And so that maybe you can introduce our next guest, who's a rising star in the Young Guns. He's moved up, and I'm almost starting to think that he may be part of the Invisible College, because he has all these interviews with all these top ranking guys, and I think maybe they brought him in there. They kicked me out years ago, and now he's in there. So introduce our guest today that we're going to talk to. You were excited. You wanted to talk to him, and you guys have a friendship. You talk in the background, and so I'm leaving it up to you guys for the future to figure out what's going on with UFOs.
Well, I'll do a quick introduction here today. We're here with James Iandoli of Engaging the Phenomenon. And I will say, even though I don't think any of us like the title Young Guns, James is my favorite of the Young Guns. I think I've been following him the longest, and you call him a rising star, but I think it's been his diligence over the last few years that he's really been able to step up his game and make the kind of important contacts that we've all been following along with so excitedly. So welcome, James. I'm glad we get this first on-camera chat, because yeah, we have talked behind the scenes for quite a few years now. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here with you. And, at least we have Nicole here to make us look pretty. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. And actually, to the idea of the Young Guns and, like Danny Silva, myself, Twitter user Jay, was there, Chris Walford, Joe Murgia. I mean, it's
Giuliano. You got to remember Giuliano. Like he's like
Giuliano Marinkovic, right? I don't consider him. He is. I guess you can consider him a young gun, but to me, he's an OG. Yeah. Giuliano Marinkovic, UFO Google he's incredible. He's absolutely somebody like yourself, Grant, who is, you know, somebody who's like a role model to me in this field of like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm working with somebody who can do all this crazy stuff. So actually the K, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but you know, Twitter user Jay was actually the guy who figured out the K Randall May thing. And
Wow, yeah.
he's also the guy who, you know, coincidentally, I guess you can say, who got the ATIP slides, Luis Elizondo's resignation letter, off of, you know, and yeah, and ATIP slide 9. We have all that because of Twitter user Jay. And you know, he got the brain scan off Hal Puthoff's website, and I mean, he just did some incredible stuff. And you know, we were working together as a you know, researching network group. So you know, it was really amazing to be part of all that. And you know, we're just like in the moment, it was incredible. And you know, that continues today in the different forms. You know, we have Loose Threads that was written by Omega Point and the Hermetic Penetrator. It's kind of like another wave of the young gun, so to speak. And you know, Omega Point will jokingly say, like, I've been speaking to the Hermetic Penetrator like every day for months. You know, actually I've known the Hermetic Penetrator for years now, and I can't speak on his behalf, so to speak, but he's a contact guy. I mean, we linked up early on because he understands the whole contact thing, and we both have a background in the contact underground, or the contact network and contact working groups, basically.
Yeah. No.
Oh, which this will bring me to a comment. Like, I think maybe it's a rite of passage for the young guns to be accused of being part of the IC. So like, James, just let me ask you, are you CIA? Are you any of the other 17 divisions of intelligence? Nothing?
I'm a boring dad who does this on the side. You know what I mean? I work 2 jobs. I work full time. I have kids. But I'm also, you know, experiencer and a researcher. And, you know, obviously because of my experience, this is, you know, my diligence is not due. I mean, yeah, I'm interested in the topic, but the true diligence of, like, you know, my approach is that this is something that's part of my life, right? You know, whether I like it or not. So I'm going to make the most of it. And of course I want the questions. And as Grant had said, you know, like once you're in this, that's it. That's, you know, there's no going back.
Yeah.
I took it as the biggest compliment ever to my own research. I've been accused twice in the last year, and I'm just like, thanks. That means I'm doing a good job. So yeah. Cheers to you. You're doing a good job too. All right.
Did somebody put that in the comments?
Not yet. I'm sure they will now.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to talk to James today, because I've heard James a number of times doing interviews, and he keeps hinting back to this thing that he's sort of an experiencer. And I know Nicole's an experiencer, and I'm an experiencer to some degree. I'm not sure, you know, how much there was actual contact, but I had a lot of very close encounters back in the 1970s. And so that's basically what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to sort of pick James's brain as to what he thinks, not so much he can reveal what he wants about his experience, but in terms of you hear these stories about experiencers and this and that, and that they've got these they're getting these messages, and I just wanted to get his take on the whole experience contact movement and all that kind of stuff. And because I think that's the important part. I've said numerous times that you can look at all the lights in the sky you want, and that'll give you the idea that something's going on, and it's probably not us. But if you really want to know what's going on, you got to talk to people like you, James, and Nicole, and people that are actually interacting with the intelligence. So that's what I want to talk about. But before there, everybody's into disclosure, and you've done a lot of the disclosure talks, talking to big guys like, you know, George Knapp and people like that. And so I wanted to ask you, a lot of people may not know that you were involved in the Wilson Leak document. So I want to talk, you talked to me back in December when I got the document in November, and you talked to me in December, I think it was, about it. So tell the story of you and Danny Silva and Giuliano and all these people, the fact that you guys were sitting on this, that you had the document, can you tell your part of the story to fill in history? Because it'll be an important part of history. And you guys were involved early on in that document as well.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I remember when you were talking about it, and I'm like, I have to see this document. I have to know what this is, because you were giving me all kinds of hints, like, oh, you'll know some of the people. And in retrospect, I was extremely familiar with the 1997 Wilson meeting with Dr. Stephen Greer, Edgar Mitchell, Commander Will Miller, because I was plugged into the early CSETI network, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. That's, Dr. Stephen Greer's group, and I was involved in the CE5 movement. So I had known people that were involved in that. And I knew Commander Will Miller because of that. And when one day, Danny Silva hit me up and it's like, hey, I got this document. You're not going to believe it. And I said, send it to me. So he sent it to me, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, holy crap. Because it's Thomas Wilson and Dr. Eric Davis. And I'm friends with Eric Davis at this point. And I'm like, this is not what I was expecting. But when I saw it, I said, this has to be it. This has to be what Grant has been talking about. And it all makes sense now. So that's when I called you, and I said, I think that Danny has the document. I think I have it here. It's the 15 pages or so. And you're like, yeah, that sounds like it. And, Danny, myself, Giuliano, Chris Walford, Joe Murgia, who is also friends with both Eric Davis and Commander Will Miller, like myself. So we're waiting. We're figuring like any day now, this thing is going to drop. It's going to go like wildfire. And because we have, colleagues in those circles, okay, I told Eric, I said, hey, Eric, just so you know, this is out there. Your name's all over it. I'm not going to release it, but be sure that it's going to be out there. So, prepare yourself for the shitstorm, basically. And even right then I was talking, because I had been friends with Dr. Gary Nolan for a number of years. He actually Dr. Nolan allowed me to release the caudate putainman story. He gave Twitter user Jay and myself like the exclusive on that, so to speak, probably because I was an experiencer, I suspect. And so I asked Gary, I said, what do you think about this? And it was apparent to me that he was very familiar with it. And he just went on about how impeccable Eric's memory is. And, he didn't necessarily say yes, but he kind of gave me the wink and the nod that it was the real deal. But so at the same time, like, we're all doing research, trying to get more information on it and try to verify things, try to get peripheral or, proximity information to support, whether it's true or not. So this is all going on for months. And then the unidentified, it's about I don't know if it was season 1 or season 2, the unidentified To the Stars Academy show was about to release. And Lou Elizondo said on Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson's about, saying, oh, does the U.S. government have, recovered materials from UFOs? And it looks like Tucker's about to back off the question. And Lou's like, well, he's given a kind of a long-winded answer, but he's like, I no longer work for the Pentagon, so I can't comment on behalf of them. And Tucker Carlson's about to say, okay, I understand. But then Lou just gives the infamous line, simply put, yes. So I took that and I said, hey, Eric, can you give me a public comment on what Lou had said here? And he said, Lou's comment about whether the U.S. government has recovered, crashed UFO materials is 1000% accurate. And then within, 2 minutes later said, no, use this one. And it says the U.S. government has crashed and landed UFO technology. That's 1000% correct. And, that echoes well with the last few pages of the notes, that where it's talking about they have a whole craft that they think could operate, so, that was another kind of like, wink and nod, I guess, from Eric. Anybody knows him, he's really, pushing the line a lot of times on what he says. Yeah. So, and again, going back to the alien autopsy document that was in those same files, he gave me a public statement on that, again, to use publicly, saying those alien autopsy, that email chain between Hal, Colm, Kit, and, basically the NIDS group is absolutely a real document. He didn't know how it got out, and it was actually a copy of a paper document. He knows. So he's confirming that document is 100% real. Kit Green went on to confirm it with Richard Dolan. So, again, with that, the Wilson Davis notes are in that same collection of files. So why would one be real and the other not be real? So again, that's and then again, he went on the Stephen Greenstreet interview regarding the notes. He said, Greenstreet was asking him if he can comment on the Wilson. He's like, your name's all over it. And Eric Davis says, they were leaked out of Edgar Mitchell's estate. There's nothing more I can say about it. So, I mean, like, how much further can he really go than that, right? And I think even with that, he was probably pushing it, which is something he tends to do. So, again, I'm at this point now with the Oak Shannon notes and the Jack Houck notes and everything that's in Loose Threads, which everybody should read. And I hope, Grant, you can link here in the description somewhere. It's overwhelming now. It's at the point where it's ridiculous that it's been placed. I can go to the National Archives, or I can go on the congressional website and download the Eric Wilson notes, so it's come a long way. And I think that it has played an important role.
Yeah, I see Nicole's got a question, but just a quick follow-up thing, and just to get you to confirm, you had the same problem that I had. Is these guys, because people are wondering, well, why you just put it out? And I had a guy put it out for me on the internet, but it was like you don't want to throw these guys under the bus and then drive over them because you know who they are. I mean, it was that you guys had the same problem because Danny was. That's why I said, I told you if Danny released it, I mean, he would be famous, but nobody had ever talked to him again, because that's the thing is you could sort of get blamed for being the guy that threw the guys under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, they're doing good work. I mean, people will crap on them and all the nonsense, but again, I Loose Threads really outlines it. We probably would not be in this ordeal right now where we're having the transparency without these guys like really dedicating themselves to the subject for the last 50 years, basically.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole, go ahead.
I was just going to throw in that I think my favorite tell from the last year had to be John Alexander at the SCU conference, when he pretty much just directed it right to Eric Davis in the audience and was like, he wrote it, ask him.
Yeah.
And from everything I've heard, Eric didn't deny, was just kind of like, oh my God, I got called out. So but that's been my favorite moment amongst many, even through Wilson's, I think, 3-time denial with all of this, which is expected given
it says it in the notes. It says it in the notes. It exactly says, I'll say I don't even know you. And that's exactly what he did. I don't know who Eric Davis is. And Oak Shannon. And the thing about the Oak Shannon notes is it's confirming not only the time, but the health conditions and just these minute details that you couldn't make up for a movie script or anything else. It's apparent that the peripheral information and knowledge there is all on point.
Right. I've done a little digging into possibly why Wilson would have got shut out the way he would have, or why he wouldn't be need to know. And when you start looking up special access programs and different reasons for programs to remain classified, it is so hard. I mean, you can't just like stumble in and ask a director, hey, what's going on? Even if you have top secret clearance already, some of these programs are so locked down that literally the director is the only one who can give out information on this. And you have to go through a whole process to even get approved for that person to be able to talk to you. So if somebody were to randomly ask them what's going on, even if they have the clearances, they are probably going to get lied to or told to back off, just the same way Wilson was. So,
and the funny thing about that is, in a 2018, I think, interview with Dr. Eric Davis, he's explaining the entire process of how that occurs and how you get read into the program and why you're going to be lied to. It was the Open Minds interview with Dr. Eric Davis with Alejandro Rojas, and he's explaining the whole situation of how you get read into these programs in different levels and stages. So here you have the notes floating around here, and Eric is explaining the entire process he went through to get read in to, whatever level he did, probably afterwards from that.
Well, part of the whole process, or their job being a director, is to limit the access, to keep it as small as possible. So it's not like just this open-ended party where they're like, yeah, you know what's going on, come on in. Like, nope, they're like, we've got 5 people involved and none of them have died yet, so we're not adding anybody in yet. So It's just, it's a machine that is so hard to fight, I think. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
let me give you a little scoop. This is many years ago. I talked to Eric about all this kind of stuff, but so my memory is, so this is sort of a faded memory of what I was told. And that was that he told me that Kid Green had tried to get read in on the alien autopsy. And because Kid is a physiologist, and that's what he was interested in. And because he was like the CIA guy that was allowed to talk about UFOs, was, sort of like the weird desk guy. He knew a lot of stuff about UFOs. He'd been read in on different parts of the program, but he could never get read in on the alien autopsy stuff. And that's what he was really interested in. So when I saw the alien autopsy document, I really congratulate you for bringing it up, because a lot of people just walk away from that document. It's like, it was a hoax and whatever the thing. And it's like, okay, maybe it was a hoax, but this document isn't a hoax. And these guys were actually discussing alien autopsies. And when I talked to Richard Doty, he said, oh yeah, we were talking about it with Hal Puthoff. We had a meeting at Kit Green's office, and he told me all this sort of stuff. So there was that thing that Kit Green had tried to get read in on part of the program, and he couldn't get read in on it.
Well, I mean, in the email chain or notes, whatever you want to call it, I think one of the craziest things about that email chain or document is that you have Kit Green saying that he went into the Pentagon 3 different times to get briefed on the matter.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that not insanely incredible?
Yeah.
And then he says, and I don't know if they're lying to me.
Yeah.
So that it's like, what? This guy was, if you look up his bona fides, this guy has won awards for things that he did in the late Cold War with intelligence and technology and stuff. So that's pretty incredible. And kind of an aside, which I don't want to get too much into now, I guess, but the whole issue of Zodiac is in that email chain with Hal Puthoff asking about the Sedgmaster story that's in the UFO magazine, and he lists a date like 1999 or so. And that happens to be an extremely relevant topic. So
say what you can about it, because I was surprised when you brought up Zodiac. I've only seen the name once. I really didn't know about it. And then I thought, it's like the way you asked the question was you give them sort of a plausible deniability where they can sort of walk around it, almost like, when Elizondo said, yeah, I believe they have crashed material. He didn't say, I know, he just I believe. And so to tell me a little about this, what you know about the Zodiac that you can talk about, because when they sort of confirmed that, they sort of went, well, yeah, we know about it. And it was sort of like, you're the first guy that actually pose these kind of questions to these people, to rather than, you know, asking them all of the questions nobody ever asks them is, you know, have you ever heard about this? Did you guys ever discuss it? Because that is exactly how it worked. I was dealing with Eric at the time when this all happened, when the Wilson Leak thing happened. I was talking to him when he lost his job, when he was laid off at NIDS, and he didn't have a job yet. He was trying to get a job, and he ended up getting a job with the Air Force for that program that he worked for the Air Force. But he was telling me how it worked, and basically what it was Bigelow brought in the brightest, smartest people that he could around the country to help him solve this problem. And these guys all talked among each other. And so that's the question I'm glad you did, is rather than asking them, you know, were you involved? You just ask them, hey, did you guys discuss this? You guys all get, do you ever discuss the Zodiac? Did you ever discuss this? And then they're in this situation where they've got to say, well, yeah, you know, it doesn't matter whether they believed in it, but if they say, yeah, we discussed it, then, you know, oh man, good. All these guys have discussed this. It must be for real, that, you know, that, because that was the deal, is all these guys would get together 6 times a year, these high level guys. And of course they would all chatter and talk about what's new with you. And they would all have little bits and pieces of the story. And Eric was the chief scientist there. And he would gather all this stuff, and he would ask them all these questions like Eric would do, trying to get to the bottom of it. He's one of the most aggressive researchers I've ever seen. So he'd ask Hal Puthoff about this. He'd ask, you know, Hal Puthoff or Edgar Mitchell, or, you know, Kid Green would come in and he'd try to get programs with him and stuff like that. So that was the thing, is you brought this Zodiac thing out, and I was really surprised. I went, holy cow. I thought it was sort of like a QAnon thing. Oh, what Zodiac? What the hell is he asking that? But you seem, they confirmed it. They've confirmed it. Yeah. And it was sort of like, yeah, it gave it the authenticity that this is a real deal, that these guys have discussed it. So George Knapp and these guys have all discussed it. This is the real deal. This is a real story.
Yeah. And, you know, I have to give, you know, 1,000,000% credit to Richard Dolan on this, because I had first, he brought it to my attention during an event. Is when we did the online conference. Richard had brought it up to Lou. And once I had heard about it, I said, Rich, give me everything you got on it. And he gave me all the material that he had on it. He gave me the whole background, and I've been chasing the story ever since. And it's like, it's a hard one to crack. It's one of the big ones, because you're talking about, you know, if you look at the story, right? So Zodiac was, you know, came on the scene in the late 90s, and we had Hal Puthoff talking about it because he had read the story in UFO magazine. There were 3 issues that had a story written by an anonymous writer under a pseudonym, Greg Halifax, which, you know, again, thanks to Rich and other people who were researching this behind the scenes, we know that the actual author was Jeffrey Griffith. Okay. And what's incredibly interesting about that name is it appears in the last few pages of the Wilson Davis memo. I believe the last page.
Wow.
He's a lawyer, and he was involved with, what's her name? The TRW lady, Mary Elizabeth, I believe. So again, you have this guy, Jeffrey Griffith, his name shows up in the Wilson Davis notes, and it also inadvertently shows up in the alien autopsy notes, because they reference the Sedge Masters articles, which was written by Jeffrey Griffith under a pseudonym, Greg Halifax, right? Wow. So you have these loose threads, right?
Yeah.
And the story is about an intelligence officer who does interrogations. He works for the CIA, and he's brought in to interrogate people that are involved with the crash retrieval program. And you know, in the story, again, it's like kind of like the Secret Machines thing, where it's a fact-based story written as fiction. So obviously there's going to be some details that are, you know, not accurate or changed for, you know, for reasons to protect the sources and stuff. So it's basically about this intelligence officer who becomes part of this group or program, you know, however you want to identify it. When I was asking George Knapp about it, he understands it as kind of a loose, you know, group of individuals that are involved with legacy programs, and the like. So crash retrievals, reverse engineering. I don't know the extent of it beyond that. I'd like to know. I'm trying to see if the same group could have been involved with, researching contact and abductions. That's something I'm looking into. But this is an extremely hard story to crack. But that's the premise of it, and it's everyone I've spoken to who would be in a kind of need to know or peripheral to that has, I don't want to say they've confirmed it, because I wouldn't want to say that. So, but based on my interactions, I'm confident that it's actually absolutely genuine. And George Knapp has said that, George Knapp's got the story. That's I'll tell you. To what extent? I mean, he can't report on it yet because we're still waiting for the the whistleblower language to officially be signed off and for those people to come forward. Maybe it's also involved with that. I don't know. So but I suspect that there will be more information on the group or program named Zodiac in the near future, whether it's related to some of that or just because somebody releases information on it.
Wow. So that leads to two questions that still with the Wilson leak. I wasn't going to do much on the Wilson leak, but you brought it up now. At the very end, no, not the very end. The same time they talk about they got the craft that they think will fly, they say no abductions. So you're an experiencer. You've dealt with this. And I went looking around. So Edgar Mitchell, Giuliano actually found a clip where Edgar Mitchell said, no, he doesn't think that there's these abductions the way people describe them. And Jacques Vallée poo-poos the thing. And I found Giuliano actually refound it. I found it and then I lost it. And Giuliano found it for me again, where Kid Green says no abductions ever. Right. So what was your take when you saw that? Because a lot of people say, oh, that's counterintelligence and stuff. And I'm going, no, maybe not. It's like there's an event, but what is the event? It may not be the event everybody thinks it is, like what's actually going on. So what was your impression when you saw, and what did the young guns think, or the people you talked to? Did you ever get anything on that no abductions thing that's in the Wilson leak?
We refer to it, but I definitely don't want to speak to anybody else. Even though I could assume what they would say, I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody except myself. But that, I mean, it stood out because again, in Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Science Volume 4, Jacques and Kid are talking about it, and this is something that regularly comes up, so to speak. And this to me is really it's I don't want to say confusing could be a word I could use, because on the one hand, we know that they're the Invisible College and these other people are researching abductees and abductions, right? Or we can say contactees, experiencers, people having contact. Is this because, again, and the whole thing about abductions, people can speculate many different things. Are people being like astrally or psychically taken, right? Just like when you have an out of body experience, your perception actually leaves your body, most definitely, and your actual point of reference and observation is not in your body anymore. As crazy as that sounds. So I don't know what to make of that, and that's I don't think they're, the people are saying that to lead people off the trail. I don't think that's the case. I think they're trying to understand this as much as we are, and they don't know what to make of it either. And they're saying that because they've probably investigated a lot of cases and they haven't solved it, right? Yeah. Because here's the thing, right? You have Kit and them saying that, and on the other hand, you have Lou Elizondo saying, well, if people, and Jim Semivan saying, well, if people are being taken, that's an act of war and this. So which one is it? Are they being taken or not? And if they're being taken on a level of consciousness or astrally, is that the same kind of
But
crime.
when you interviewed Jim Semivan, didn't he say he doesn't really call it an abduction? It's an event.
Right.
He had an event, and he talks about this. There does not appear to be any there. And then when he talks to, he has the conversation with Melinda Leslie, and he says he gets her to explain the whole thing about MILABs, like what's going on,
Right.
what do you know and stuff. And then he just says exactly what he says on record. Is he said there's no way they could be doing this. They would need trillions of dollars and captains and bases and stuff. He said I just can't see that I would miss that being there. That I would not have known that this was going on. That they could hide this thing. And so you get that sort of question as to, what's really, when he says, well, there's no there, he's sort of indicating that the whole thing may be up in the air as to what the hell's going on. And even his own this thing where he says it was an event and that he was upset about it. But I just wondered, because that's an important part. And with the question I asked you to ask Jim Semivan, I'll give you why I asked that question, because Jim Semivan, is when you interviewed him, said there was an entity standing behind me and it had a guardian kind of feel to it or something to that effect. And if you look at the work of Michael Newton, you take people, Journey of Souls, and you look at the story where we go into the afterlife, and then you have a life review in front of this panel, and your soul guide stands behind you on the left-hand side. And so when Jim says, oh, there was this entity standing behind me and it had this guardian type thing going on about it, and I'm thinking, holy cow, that's Michael Newton. And the same thing when I did the UFO sky pilots, they would tell this story. They would say there was somebody behind me. I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was aliens or it was humans or whatever. And they were standing behind me and they'd say, okay, go ahead and do it. And so I was trying to, when Jim brought it up, I go, holy cow, again, he's describing what the sky pilots describe. And you get into this thing as to what's actually going on, where nobody sees anybody being abducted, and it's the individual event and stuff. Or people say it's inside you, go inside you. It's all inside you. Even, Stephen Greer has the quote from the Sufi, you see yourself as a puny form when within you, the entire universe is unfolded. Like you're going within yourself, and this event is this kind of thing where it's all consciousness, and whoever this phenomena is able to manipulate the consciousness and take you to that place. So I found that pretty interesting, because some of the stuff that you brought up in your interviews I found so useful in terms of like what Jim Semivan says to you, because I think what you and maybe the other young guns do is you can agree or disagree with these guys, but listen carefully to what they're saying, record every word, and then cross-index what they say. And suddenly it's like, oh, that other guy said the same thing, or something like that, that they're giving you these little clues as to how to put the pieces together.
Yeah. And kind of one thing on the MyLabs thing, or the MeLabs, is, which I found kind of really strange, is that, Dr. Stephen Greer has been talking about that for years.
Yeah.
And Tom DeLonge, you can see him kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where Stephen Greer's coming from a very peaceful perspective and let's make contact and be ambassadors. And Tom DeLonge is like, we got to squash the bugs or whatever. Yeah. So, and again, he says different things at different times, where he indicates that, even in his books, that there are positive entities. So I think some of that is, I'd like to get more clarity on what he means. I have some ideas, but you have Tom DeLonge on the opposite end talking about MyLabs. He included it in his book, The Secret Machines Chasing Shadows. Like, and there's an interview with him where everybody's outside and he's doing like a press release for the book or something. And he's talking about MyLabs. And I think like Peter Levenda's there with him. I don't think he commented on it, but I made a MyLab video where I included that clip, and I included the clip from Dr. Stephen Greer, because there are people on two opposite ends of the spectrum as to what they think about the UFO phenomenon. And they're both saying that it's a real thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. I know, we have a mutual friend, Melinda Leslie, who is kind of like the premier researcher on the subject. I keep telling her she's got to write a book because I want the material all in front of me so I can go over it. So Melinda, write the book, please.
Melinda needs a couple books out, I think.
Yeah,
she could write
seriously.
2 or 3 or 4.
At least, but do the MyLab one first, because that's, I mean, that's such a huge issue. And I think, people will automatically have a knee-jerk reaction to it, and they just like, that's kind of nonsense. I don't know. I really don't know. I've never had a military abduction, so I couldn't. I have nothing to compare it to.
One of the things that that Jim Semivan told you, which occurred to me, is this thing that he talks about, what it's like to be inside the government. If you knew what it was like to be inside the government, and I sort of understand what he's talking about with that thing, is that Bill Moore brought this back up in the 1980s with cattle mutilations. And that's this whole idea that when you're running a big operation like that, they look at, I can't remember the words they use, the benefit versus the fallout. So the thing is, what are you going to get? That's what Jim Semivan said to you. What do you really get from a MILAB abduction? Like, what's the point? He said, and the risk is so high. It's like, you certainly, as he said to you, he said, you certainly not going to take an American citizen, because, I mean, if you get caught, the whole government's going to fall. So what's the point? And that's what Bill Moore used to say about, they were sticking they had foil inside the cow's mouth. And then Bill Moore said the CIA would never do that because the fallout would be too severe. Why would you just not go buy a cow from when the guy sells it at the auction? The risk is so high. If you get caught mutilating a cow, they had 10,000 mutilations. There'd be like 10,000 lawsuits and billions of dollars, and the government would the fallout just to get a cow or just to abduct somebody. The fallout is so big if you get caught doing it.
Yeah, well, and so that's the thing that I mean, allegedly, I know you know this, but for the audience, one of the reasons for MyLabs is that you have somebody who's a contactee or an abductee or an experiencer, and you're basically interrogating them to find out what the phenomenon told them, right? Did they tell you about technology? Did they teach you psychic, skills? Did they enhance you? So that's speculation on the theory as why they would do that, and, as to whether it's the government or if it's some kind of rogue operation, right? Or I don't know any of that. But the cattle mutilation thing, it almost seems certain that there's something to that with some kind of program. And even at Skinwalker Ranch and what Colum Kelleher was saying is that, like, they had found like needles and things that, human medical things by some of these mutilations. So the mutilation thing, I'm not as skeptical of that occurring. For why, again, he goes into that. I think he's talking about a U.S. kind of version of mad cow disease with the prions. And actually, funny enough, on Dave Pallady's new Missing 411, the UFO connection, they covered that aspect of it with the prions and the mutilations. I think he just briefly touched on it. Which was another interesting note. So as far as that, I couldn't tell, whether that's what they're looking for, if it's something completely different, or is some aspect of the phenomenon actually doing that. People like that have indicated that seems to be the case.
Yeah. Now, I think Nicole wants to, but let me jump in one more time. Nicole's going to be a helicopter girl pretty soon. She's going to be flying around Illinois in a helicopter. And I always brought this up that didn't make sense with me with getting 10,000 cows and then stopping it, is the fact that the two biggest operations the U.S. ever ran that were publicly known is the Iranian hostage rescue, where they crashed 2 helicopters into each other, and then bin Laden, where they went in with the stealth helicopters and crashed a helicopter. So what's the chances you could pull off 10,000 cattle mutilations and not crash a helicopter? They'd be crashing the biggest operations they've had all failed because they crashed a helicopter. So hopefully Nicole is safe on her helicopter when she flies around and rescues people from wherever. And
Well,
Well,
what I was going to jump in and just kind of maybe sum up for maybe the public at large is now entering into this phase of what we're dealing with abductions is I think we need to break it into categories of whether it could possibly be a physical abduction or a consciousness abduction. And if it is a physical abduction, it could be them, or it could be us with mill lab situations or my lab situations. And if it is a consciousness abduction, we still have to account for physical marks on the body or things of that nature. And so that brings up this question of, can your consciousness manifest physical things? Like we know sometimes anxiety can manifest as a rash or sores on your body, things of that nature. So are we dealing with something like that? And if it is a physical abduction, and if it is a group, are we dealing with a psyop or some sort of interrogation? And I do like to point out from the phenomenon, James Fox's film, The Phenomenon, there is a very short clip of Jacques Vallée holding up a piece of paper that he got from his Project Blue Book days. And he alludes that this piece of paper pretty much confirms that it is us abducting experiencers. Now, whether it's for interrogation or, I don't really know.
Well, and there's several parts to that. And I asked Jacques about that when I interviewed him, but he, in Forbidden Science Volume 4, he says that he has confirmed, or he's secured, so he has it. I wonder where it would be collected or archived. A document that says that the CIA had staged UFO events in South America, in Argentina and Brazil.
Right.
And again, if you go back to his Jeffrey Mishlove interview, he's saying the same thing, 40 years ago, essentially, 30, 40 years ago, whenever that interview was. And again, I made a short little video clip showing both the quote and this, this interview with Jacques Vallée, because he's talking about the same thing, that it seems that some UFO events, and again, I don't know if he's talking about abductions or just very close encounters that with a physical craft and or entities, seem to be hoaxed, not on the part of the witness or the experiencer, but on the part of a very well organized group with the resources to do that.
Yeah, and I would point out there that the difference would be that if the Americans heard that CIA was abducting people in Peru, they'd say, yeah, good, they probably deserve it. But you take an American citizen, that's a different story. I mean, if the CIA is, that's the whole deal was when Pandolfi first became public, he went to Dan Smith. And that's when he told him, he said, I'm going to Los Alamos to talk to the alien. And then Dan phoned Los Alamos and had John Alexander came on the line. And then he put this in a blog. And then Ron came back and he said, next time, just make sure that my name and CIA aren't in the same sentence. And so Dan said, well, this guy's not even supposed to be dealing. Well, what's the CIA? He's not supposed to be dealing with American citizens on UFOs. And he actually had the Inspector General. And the claim was that they spent $500,000 doing an investigation on Ron Pandolfi, why he was talking to American citizens about UFOs, and the answer came back that was part of his job. So it's this idea that you to do something to a foreign citizen is fair and good. Even I think Jim Semivan said we break lots of laws when you go overseas. Then it's an open season. But the idea of taking an American citizen when you got a lawyer standing beside you, and the question is, well, what are you going to get out of this? So just because I do remember that. And I think the document will be at Rice University, and you can probably get access to it. I think you're a limited researcher because Diane Pasolka has access to the files. That if you probably pushed, you could probably get access to the files at Rice University that Jacques Vallée has there. They're held for 10 years, but researchers that qualify can actually look at these files.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe that's an angle we're not looking at either. Maybe it's not our government doing it to our citizens. Maybe it's foreign operatives working in the United States trying to figure out what experience.
It's the Canadians. So, it's us. We're doing it.
I knew it.
They're doing it for peace. No, well, I think, and I could be wrong on this. I think in the Secret Machines book, and I don't want to weigh too much on them because it is a fictional story, that one of the messages that they were trying to get across is one of the MyLabs being done was by the Soviets, or, you know, whoever had the Arrow crafts, you know, the reverse engineered crafts from, you know, the Soviet Union or Russia.
Interesting. Right, well, it'll be up to you guys
several times. Yeah.
It'll be up to the young guns to solve this big mystery of the abductions, because that's a big part of the thing. And related to that, the reason we want to do this interview, and we better get to it, is the experiencers. And I'll tell you a little story that to get us going, to make my first. I'll be the first one to sort of admit what's going on. I had two close encounters with what we call now orbs, big orbs. Which we called ground lights at the time. The word orb didn't exist back in 75. And the second one, I didn't realize it until I was writing up the story just the other day. The second one, I had some young kids that were doing science fair projects who walked across this muddy field, and this object had crashed into another one. And it was like this giant explosion, like with really weird, like giant explosion with no noise. And when I got there, I was standing under these telephone lines, and it looked like it was on the next mile road. It looked like it was a mile over. So I said to the kids, "Oh, we wasted our time. We're going to have to go back here." And then I said, "What's that noise?" And it was just like a beehive. It's just like this real loud noise. And I'm looking, and I couldn't see anything. And then I went and put my ear against the telephone pole. It was just really, really loud, this buzzing noise. And then I stood out and I looked, and there was an object right above the telephone lines. I think in the book, I can't remember what it was, maybe 3 telephone poles away. And then as I was writing it up the other day, I'm thinking, that's weird. I don't remember what happened after I saw the light. There's no way I would have said, "Oh, there's a light, and let's go back." It was really weird that for the first time after 47 years, I suddenly realized like something may have happened there, that this light was there. That's the last thing I remember. I looked at this light and I said, "Oh, there it is. It's above the telephone lines right beside us." And then the next thing I remember, we were going back across the field, but I never put it together for 47 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's things that I have in my own experiences where, you know, again, after reflecting on them after years, I recognize these very strange details. And, you know, one of those kind of strange details in my own experience was that, you know, I had this, I call it like a trauma-induced out-of-body experience. So it was like a simulated near-death experience, but I actually wasn't dead at all, and I wasn't close to death. But, you know, during the thing, I thought I had left my body. I thought I was dead because I was in this car accident. And the vantage point that I had, that I was looking down at the accident from, was exactly like that exact point. Yeah. I had just a few months earlier, exactly the same exact spot where I saw a fireball in the sky in broad daylight. Same exact location.
Holy cow. So you were in a car. Let me, because I'll tell you a story you probably never heard before that'll just blow you away. So you were in a car accident, and then you had this out of body experience, and you're looking at the car. And how much earlier did you see the light there?
2 to 3 months. About, yeah.
Good. Okay, you want to hear a bizarre story? I don't know. Yeah. He must have made it public because I think it's in my book. So Chris Bledsoe was married twice. Do you know that? So his first wife, do you know the story about his first wife?
Not too much. Yeah.
Okay. So his first wife, when he was coming back from the abduction experience, he's coming back down this road that goes to Highway 15 that goes down the coast to Florida. So he's going down this road, and they're fighting in the back seat. These two guys. It has who gets dropped off first, and they thought the end of the world was coming and all that sort of stuff. And they're freaking out. And he goes along, and he gets to this turn in the road. And you remember he describes there's this big, huge thing sitting above the power lines, and I think he said it had windows, and it was huge. It was like two of these power line things, which are like, I don't know how far apart. It's just, the thing must have been like hundreds of feet across. And he stops, and he thought, wow, that's so cool. And he wanted to stop and look at it. And the guys in the back seat are going, no, 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 go, 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 go. And then he makes this turn, and he drops he goes to the far guy, drops him off, and comes back and drops the other guy off or whatever. And then he tells me the story. He says, you know, where that thing was sitting on this curve of the road, he said many years before he was shot, his first near-death experience was in a bush very near that corner in the bush. And his wife, they were going to a party. And so he's coming along, he's going along, and all of a sudden he sees there's this car that has flipped over and into this yard, and it's upside down in this yard. And he goes, and he doesn't see anybody in the car. And then he goes to the front door, and he says to the people, you better call an ambulance. Some car has crashed in your front lawn. And then it's dark, and so he goes walking back, and he trips over this body, and he picks it up, and it's his wife, and she dies in his arms. That's exactly where that UFO was when he was going back, when he was saying, oh, let's stop and look at this thing. So it was this very bizarre thing where it's almost like they can link up events, that they link up this event to a UFO sighting. And there's almost like they're putting the pieces together of just these bizarre things. That's very bizarre. It's almost the same story that Chris Bledsoe told.
Well, and to go back, I'll tell you what happened in the first time I've told the story a few times before, but, you know, just for the sake of this conversation. So, you know, this was in 2007, and I'm working overnight shifts. And before I finished my shift, there's one of my coworkers in the area. He's like a porter. He's cleaning the air or whatever. And he says, he comes up to me when he's cleaning the air, and he says, hey, did you hear about the UFOs in Mexico? And that's not a conversation of anything I would have with this guy. This guy's like super conservative. And back then I'm more in the closet, so to speak. Yeah. So when he said that, it's like, wow, you know, that I didn't hear about the UFOs in Mexico. So I said no, but I was thinking, why would he ever say that to me? Like, this is guy like, hey, how's your family? You know, have a good day. So I thought it was strange, but I shrugged it off, and I drove home. You know, I went to sleep, and it's the daytime. So when I go to sleep, I have this insane dream that I'm in my old neighborhood, that, you know, where I grew up. And there's this UFO like 15, 20 feet above my car. It's this big orange electric static UFO. And there's literally like physical sensations of static electricity and all this other stuff. And in my dream, I'm freaking out. I'm super reactionary. I'm not even thinking. I'm just like, I have to get away from this thing. So in my dream, I'm just driving, and I can't get away from it. And then I just snap out of my dream after a few minutes of the whole thing. And I never got away from the object, whatever it was. So when I woke up, it's the afternoon now. And I'm trying to like reorient myself. Like, you know, you snap out of a dream or a nightmare or whatever it is. Yeah. And you're like gathering yourself, like, okay, where am I? What time is it? Whatever. And a family member walks in the house, and the first thing that they say to me is, did you hear about the UFOs in Mexico? And I said, you know, screw this. This is bullshit, basically, at this point. So I go outside and go in my car, and I'm thinking I'm going to go down the street and get some food, and just like cool off. And I get in my car and I start driving, and within 200-300 feet, and again, this is about spring, summer, it's like 3:30 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, clear day. As I'm driving, I just see a fireball in the sky, and it's stationary. And the first thing I think is like, holy shit, that's a UFO. And as soon as I thought that, it started to move, and I'm like freaking out. But at this point, I'm ecstatic, right? I'm like, holy shit, I gotta like see this thing. I gotta follow it. And I tried to follow it, and eventually, you know, it's just gliding across seamlessly. Perfect fireball, you know, and it just eventually got out of view, and I was no longer able to follow it. But the 2 to 3 months later is when I got in the car accident at that exact location. And that point in the sky was my vantage point looking down at the car. And I didn't realize that until I was actually telling the story to Dr. Gary Nolan one day. And I was like, holy shit. Now that I think about it, that was exactly the vantage point, was where I saw the object. And then, so, and that event too, the trauma-induced out-of-body experience in the car accident, where I had this face-to-face encounter with this light being. And I knew, like, I absolutely knew for a matter of fact, when I was face-to-face with this light being, that it was not separate from me. Wow. It was literally one with me, right? If I can, whatever that's supposed to mean. Like, I knew it as a matter of fact. There's no question in my mind. And I didn't think how or what or why, but I just knew it. And again, I had this thing, there was like a perfect angelic, crystalline, heavenly orchestra. And, at this point in my life, I'm like studying Buddhism and New Age stuff and meditating for hours a day. And so I'm not religious at this point, right? But the words, or what I heard and felt was, God is all there is, ever was, and ever will be.
Wow.
And again, that's not something I would think, because that's not where my mind is at. I'm studying all this other stuff where, like, the universe is one, more like that kind of thing, not thinking of God. So that, and right after that, and that's while I'm face to face with this being. And then it shifts into this thing where I'm perceiving the past, the present, and the future as one fluid thing at the same time. And that's when my reality restarts. And it's like a system reboot. And when I had the system reboot thing, like blackness, and then I'm back conscious again, so to speak, that's when I'm above the scene looking down at everything. And when I was looking down at everything, I was like, so that's it, huh? Like, I basically passed away, and I'm looking down at my body and this accident, and I'm done. But it was complete equanimity. I was so cool with the whole thing. There was not a regret, remorse, sad feelings, or none of that. It was just perfect the way it was. And I was completely fine with it. And after a few moments of that, that's when I just, boom, I'm back in my body. I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, I'm alive. So, and the crazy thing about that, so it was after I end up leaving the hospital the next day and all that, they do all the scans and make sure I don't have internal bleeding or head injuries, which I'm still not sure about. Don't think I get the results on that one. But the next day I'm in my room, and the evening, this is about like 9 p.m. at night. I'm in my room, I'm cleaning. I'm just like, wow, my God. I'm so grateful to be alive.
Yeah.
Like, and if, like, I don't want to go too far into this, but you want to talk about like a spiritual transformation, like that. I was never the same after that experience. Like the other experiences before, they changed me, but this one was just like, I was not the same person any longer, at all. It was just a complete transformation. And I can say that looking back now, I was never the same from that point on. I just, that's a whole nother story, as to, I can get into that another time. But like, even physically, I felt like high vibrations, right? Like physically I felt different. And so again, I'm in my room and I'm cleaning, and I'm just grateful to be alive. And all of a sudden I hear and I feel, because it's not just hearing, I felt a voice in my body, in my mind, that said, come outside. And as soon as I heard the voice, I knew everything that was going on. I knew everything that was about to happen. And I knew I had a vision of these two beings. And I hate to say this because it's so like cliche or whatever, or ufological, but there was, they were blonde hair, blue eyed entities. There's a male and a female in these little, in these suits. And they expressed this like this compassion or love, and it felt to me as if I can feel how they were feeling, like their level of reality, their vibration, their cosmic understanding, and they communicated through this feeling, which is actually a weird thing that in the Zodiac notes that they talk about, that the beings have the capacity to do that, which is just a kind of random side. So they expressed to me, and again, I at this point I'm taking everything super literal. Like at this point in my life nowadays, I look at everything and I say, is this metaphoric? Is it symbolic? Is it deception? I don't know. It felt genuine to me, but if, who knows? So these entities expressed that they were like related to us. And it felt like that they meant literally. And that's why it's kind of interesting about the thing that Ross Coulthart and Tom DeLonge were talking about an ancient civilization. Maybe they're related to us. I don't know. That's again another side kind of thing. But anyways, so when I heard the voice say, "Come outside," I'm instantly running to the door. I get outside, and there were some trees like right above, so I had to run down these stairs to get to the clearing where the driveway was, and I can see up in the sky. And even before I get to the bottom stair and I'm able to look up, I hear like a low hum. It's like vroom, vroom, vroom. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm having, while this is going on, there's so many things going on. I'm having like a Kundalini awakening experience. Like I have these pulses through my body.
Wow.
Incredible love, bliss, ecstatic ecstasy, all that kind of feeling.
Yep.
And I look up and I see this craft that's like a hexagon with different color lights are going around like this. And there's just this perfectly square white light fixture. And I'm freaking out at this point. And I'm just following it through my driveway. It's just literally right above the trees. So maybe it's 80 feet in the air, maybe less. And it literally just vanishes and reappears instantaneously about 1,000 feet away. And when I looked to where it was, there was two other crafts, and they have the lights going around it, all multicolored, different lights, red, blue, yellow, orange, the whole thing. And they're just slowly moving around in the sky. And at this point, I'm thinking, like, did I hit my head so hard that I'm hallucinating? No, like literally. Yeah. This point, I don't know what I'm thinking, have I just like gone insane? So I ran in my house, and my family members in there, and I said, you got to come outside. And they said, why? I said, they're here. And they said, who's here? I said, just come out, So they come out and they see these crafts, and this goes on for maybe 20, 25 minutes.
Wow.
With these different lights in the sky, and they're moving, and the lights are going around, they're disappearing and then reappearing. And I'm thinking that this is disclosure. I think it just, like this is it. Like this is open contact kind of thing. Yeah. Because in my mind, everybody was witnessing this at that time. Yeah. I didn't consider that nobody would be seeing this. I was thinking like, this is going to be all over the news, that these UFOs are real and they're here and they're visiting us. And, so anyway, the whole event ends when these two objects, there's two of them left, and they have the lights spinning around. They're heading towards each other, and they're going like this. And I'm thinking in my mind, holy shit, they're about to crash. And as soon as they make contact, they just both disappear. And that was it. The lights are done. There's no more, and it's over. The demonstration's over. And I was just like, holy shit. Because it wasn't, again, it was the first event, and then the second event, and then this third event, all within this 2 to 3 month period of the first one happening, and then the fireball in the sky, then the trauma-induced OBE thing, and then the very next day, this event. And that, at that point, I was like activated. Mm-hmm. And they very much communicated, as far as I understand, right? I still have kind of like ideas of, am I interpreting it this way? Is this a literal message? Is this deception? Those are kind of like 3 categories I look at. I felt that it was very genuine. And, they communicated to me that they wanted people to know that they were here and that they wanted to help us, basically. And that's when, at that point, like, I had researched UFOs before this. I had read the books, like Dr. J. Allen Hynen's book on Hudson Valley UFO, Jim Marr's book, Alien Agenda, and all these other books. So I was already reading this stuff and researching it for a number of years. But at this point, this is 2007. I'm 20 years old. This made it a life mission for me at this point. Because even, again, when I was a kid, I had experiences with entities in my room, and those were frightening. I wasn't 100% sure that those were related to the UFO thing. I still can't say for certain. But that was like highly telepathic, because those entities, the first thing that I ever heard was, he can see us. And, I was like frozen, like scared shitless, basically. But after that, those string of events happened. Like, this became a life mission for me, where, like, I now know, like, beyond any reasonable doubt, that this is a very real thing. And I felt obligated, a sense of responsibility to work on it in any way I could. And I knew by having those experiences that, nobody, that component of transformation is not going to carry over unless somebody has an experience for themselves. You can research and read about it, and it could be powerful, and it can be paradigm shifting. But when you have that experience, that's when you have what Jeffrey Kripal calls the flip. That's it. You're in a different reality at that point. You're perceiving reality in a different way. Again, similar to Jacques Vallée's Dr. X. It's a transformation. And that's how I ended up finding CE5 and getting involved in the CE5 network and the CE5 community, because I realized, for somebody to truly have that understanding, not just knowledge of this kind of stuff, but the understanding on an experiential level, like an insight or vipassana, self-realization or realization of it, the experience is the thing that's going to do it. And, I ended up finding CE5. And the funny thing about that is, when I found it, I was like, oh my God. Like, when I first heard Dr. Stephen Greer talking about it, I was like, that's exactly how I experienced contact. And like, you would not know those kind of details and nuances unless you experienced it yourself. That's how I knew who was the real deal.
Yeah.
Even though I went out and I tested him, so to speak, at an event. But the funny thing is, I was like, why didn't I ever think of that? It was so obvious. And anyways, just a quick story about that. And I know Dr. Stephen Greer is highly controversial, and I have plenty of disagreements with him on a number of things, not even just his theories but his conduct, mainly his conduct, with how he burned bridges and interacted with different people in negative ways. But the guy's work has been historic. And again, we might not have Tom DeLonge here doing what he's doing if Stephen Greer wasn't there as an example and kind of brought him in and gave him the tapes and showed him, hey, look, you can talk to insiders and do all this thing. Everything he was doing, Disclosure Project. But, just for the sake of that, when I found CSETI, I instantly, started practicing the CE5 thing, like a ridiculous amount. And I eventually went to an event in Rio Rico, Arizona. It was in 2010.
Okay.
So, I'm already familiar with all the work and everything, but it was actually it was a 3-day conference, but it also had, at the night, they were doing field work and everything.
Yeah.
So, Richard Hoagland was there. Colin Andrews, and then Greer would do his training, and he did his puja stuff and meditation, just because that's how he does his process. That's his thing. So the very first night we actually go out for the field work, and we see what we call flash bulbs, right? Just these points of light that blip in and out, and alleged streakers, but they were not meteors because they were literally turning in the sky. They were making like S patterns. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I've had some pretty outstanding contact experiences now, but I want some kind of validation. So I was asking for this validation from the phenomenon. So within a few minutes of me putting out that kind of request, I just see this ruby red orb that's maybe 20 feet away, and it's just like 10 feet in the air right there. And it looks like if you ever stare at a bright light and then look over and you see like a blob, it looked like that. And it was like imprinted on top of reality. And I was like thinking in my head, like, holy shit. And I'm looking around and nobody's looking at it. And I'm like, it's right there. It's almost the size of a basketball. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything about this because people are going to say I'm making it up or I'm seeing things or my mind's playing tricks on me. So I'm not saying shit about this. And it disappeared after maybe 10 or 15 seconds. And another 20 seconds after that, maybe, Dr. Greer goes, there was just a ruby red orb right here. And he circles the exact spot with his laser. And I was like, that was the confirmation. However you want to speculate that the phenomenon interacted within that frame, that happened. And that for me was that was my confirmation. I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track here. And I went on to do other, ambassador to the universe week-long trainings with Greer. And, when it comes to the meditation and stuff, the guy he's an incredible instructor. He was a transcendental meditation instructor from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, like a legitimate one. He used to teach Sanskrit. So when it comes to that stuff, he's super knowledgeable and he's a great meditation teacher. I can say that. And when I went to the week-long training, there were a number of incredible things that happened there as well. Just for the record, there was actual genuine anomalous activity, and, whether people like it or not, Stephen Greer is one of these people, just like Christopher Bledsoe, who, and Dorothy Izat, and plenty of other people who are not known. And I know, Grant, a number of, again, and there's a bunch of these people around, maybe on this video, right? But they don't advertise in that way. And, he, as far as that, he was the real deal. And Dr. Joseph Burks will attest to that too, with that in the early days, the level of contact that was going on with CSETI was extraordinary. I mean, there's a number of people that are coming together and they're participating in an intentional and conscious based way. That definitely has the effect to it as well, right? So is it the chicken or the egg kind of thing? But Greer did have a track record as an experiencer. So there's a whole ton to that.
Yeah, I'll because I've sort of not interacted with Greer, but I've known him for many years, had one contact with him. And people always forget. People always they want to have the Messiah complex where who's the guy that's going to save us, and then they come along and then find out the guy's got some baggage or whatever. Anybody who's doing this kind of thing has a big ego. I mean, and as the Bible says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So everybody thinks there's good guys and bad guys. There's just people who do good and bad things. And Greer has a lot of good things he does, and there's things that he really upsets people about, and everybody's the same thing, especially if you're running a big organization like that and you're going up against the U.S. government and against the black ops people. You got to have a lot of chutzpah to do that kind of stuff. And then Greer was the only guy who would do it. Everybody else would walk away and say, no, I don't want to do that.
I don't know if Joseph Burks wants me to say this publicly, but he's like, Greer's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch.
Yeah, that was Nixon's line. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? We might not have To the Stars Academy. We might have not had a number of things if he wasn't doing everything that he did. And, you know, credit where it's due. We probably wouldn't have, we probably wouldn't have the Wilson Davis notes, the meeting with Eric Davis and Tom Wilson, if he wasn't put on the radar because of that meeting with Ed Mitchell, Stephen Greer, and all that. So there's a ton of things that you can't predict that are almost like operating on a quantum, you know, pre-causative level, where these things, like, everything was set in motion. And obviously there were others that came before Greer that made it possible for him to do what he did as well.
Yeah. So, Nicole, go ahead. Oh, Nicole has a question. Got a question?
Oh, no, I'm just sitting here in awe, actually, listening to James go through this, because I'm sure maybe we've talked a little bit behind the scenes, but I just have so many similarities with everything that you just went through that I'm just kind of awestruck. So
yeah,
I guess the only thing I could even add to this is this this theme of like returning to like a place of origin. You know, my first sighting in 1995 was this giant green fireball, and I was with two other people, and I've spoken about this before publicly, and you know, we all three remembered the event differently, and we had missing time. And then that led me to sort of become obsessed, but silently. You know, I was sky watching all the time. I always wanted to go back to that location. Like I moved all around sort of the Midwest over the next 10 years, but it was like, I would feel this calling, like, I got to go home. I got to go back to this spot. I got to see what's going on. And it was almost 20 years to the day that I started, I call them my experiencer symptoms, that it was like I kept getting called outside. It was like, you got to go to your spots, you got to watch. And it was like 3 days in a row. And I was even talking with Grant and Dave Scott at the time. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I keep getting called out, like, and nothing's there. And then all of a sudden, like, my phone started blowing up. All friends in the area were like, Nick, there's something in the sky. There's something over, you know, this town or that town. And I just flew out of my house. I'm looking up in the sky. I go to my spot. I look all around, totally disappointed. I'm like, what is this? Nothing's here. And I like threw all my cameras back in the car, and I looked up, and it was right above me. And I went to Facebook Live, and I got to confirm with other people. And this one was tear-shaped, and it was so strange. Like, it was changing colors like you said it was. I was able to get it on camera for close to 5 minutes before it just poof, disappeared. And that was sort of like my confirmation of, after 20 years of kind of thinking that I was crazy, or, you know, there was I've had a head injury or two. So I wondered if it was all in my head. And that was kind of like a solidifying thing for me. But the only thing I can say that really changed in that 20 years or so was, it was within the same year that I kind of just gave up this nuts and bolts angle and really dove into the spiritual side, like you said, or the consciousness side. And Grant had kind of given me some pointers on like left brain, right brain exercises and how to toy around with that. And I did start diving more into meditation. And I've wondered since if that came into play with this second sighting, like kind of that letting go aspect and accepting it for what it was. And yeah, we can talk about light beings some other times and out of body experiences. It was so similar. I'll share those with you some other time.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe you'll come on my channel and you can talk about that, or we can talk privately. Either.
There we go. We have some topics.
Yeah. And Grant, just I don't know if you ever covered this, but if you know, for the right left brain synchronization, that you have hemisync, right?
Yeah.
But you also have something called nadi shodhana. So that's like the alternate nostril breathing.
Oh yeah. I've done that. Yeah.
And when you're doing that, you're synchronizing the hemispheres of the brain as well, because that left, right, left, right, left, right, until you bring them into, you know, harmony.
This leads to the question that you've talked to a lot of the invisible college guys. Now you've tried to interact with these guys, which is the thing you want to do. You want to find out who knows what's going on, and then let's pick their brain and let's figure out what's going on. So you are the one that mentioned to me that the John Burroughs thing that Kid Green had told him. What did Kid Green tell him to do? It was
okay. So yeah. I'm trying to remember if it was Kate Green or Hal Puthoff, but they told him you want to do Vipassana with Krapulya yoga. And so in thinking about that, it makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. But Vipassana is insight meditation. So in insight meditation, you're just observing all the sensations. And there's different styles of how you want to do Vipassana, right? There's like the Goenka approach, which is like you're kind of doing a body scan, going through your body part by part and observing the sensations. Because the idea of Vipassana and insight meditation is you're observing reality detached as it is, as the witness. And in training that, you actually begin to observe reality in a deeper way. And I have interviews with Vipassana instructors about that and stuff, which is on my Meta Perspective channel. But Krapulya yoga, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is it's like, because there's all different types of yoga. There's, I also practice Kriya yoga and stuff, but that one is actually one where you deal with asana or asanas, which means the postures. So you're coordinating your breathing with these postures and movement. So when you're combining them, you're kind of, it's going to put you in an altered state. I'll put it like, you know what I mean? It puts you into like a state of what people would call flow consciousness, hyper intuition. It's actually, it's not so much like if you're trying to get out of your body. Actually, on the opposite, when you kind of adapt, you merge your mind and consciousness with the body, like the Shaolin practice is body, mind, spirit. So you're making them one. So you're actually harmonizing the body with the mind. You're not trying to get out of your body. You're harmonizing the body with the mind. And when that occurs, you open up these potentials. So that you can actually take that approach that is recommended, whether it was Kid or Hal, and you can use Vipassana with Qigong, right? It's very similar. Or you can use Vipassana with any other type of yoga, presumably. That just happened to be the two types that they recommended. Maybe they had reasons for that, because if you look, you can find some studies on both of those type of practices and how they affect the mind and the brain and so on, and the body. And more importantly, actually, it's included with the body, but it's important to point out is that you're dealing with the nervous system, and you're refining the nervous system, and your awareness of it and sensations. And that actually brings up a really important point, in my opinion, a very interesting one, is the researcher Chupacabra. He put together this really awesome, like 30-minute documentary called Shadows of the Invisible Sun. And he's got this guy, Ishtak Bentov, in it. And he was, the actual documentary has to do with the Gateway process and the CIA's investigation into it. And, so I forget how somehow the Bentov was involved, whether they were just referencing his work, or I believe that was the case. They were saying, he's, the Gateway process correlates with Bentov's work, and Bentov in this talk, he's talking about the nervous system, and he's also saying, like the scale of consciousness, and he has this bell curve chart, and he's saying, no, if you have a curve like this, I can't really, do it here. I don't have pen and paper, but you have, people on the low end who are kind of very reactionary, territorial, whatever. You have the average people, they're kind of like over here. So on the bell curve, minority here, the majority of people are where we are today. We're kind of doing our human things and whatever. And on the forward end, the evolutionary part of this curve where evolution is taking place, and these people are actually, they're evolved beyond, in a way, they're perceiving more of reality than the average person. So these people are like savants, people that are on different parts of the spectrum, and Bento was talking about this decades ago in the 70s, I believe. And the funny thing is, if you look at Dr. Gary Nolan's work, he's doing the same thing. You have these people that either have autism or schizophrenia. And, again, he did this as part of the study at looking at these people to compare them. And, somebody that's hearing or seeing things that aren't there, on the extreme end, how much of that is hallucinatory, like a hallucination, or how much of it is that they're seeing another part of reality that everybody else isn't quite seeing yet. And of course, there could be adverse effects to that. I mean, I can't articulate it the way Bento does in this documentary, which everybody should watch. But he even references, like, during the time of the Bible, they only talk about 4 colors because that's what they saw. They saw only so many shades of color. Today we see thousands and thousands of colors. And I forget who was talking about this, but there's a thing where, like, even right now in the world, there's like a small section of people, and I think most of them are women. They're able to perceive more colors than the majority of reality, than the majority of the population, which I was like fascinating. So these people, their nervous system is evolving. So what they're able to perceive and sense is what is expanding. Right. And how does that affect your reality? So there's a lot of really fascinating things there with the nervous system. And even Bento said, this is an evolution of the nervous system. This is, our perception systems. And, the yogis and stuff, those kind of practices, meditation, Qigong yoga, Vipassana and Kripalu yoga, these things are opening up your senses and expanding, so you're forcing the evolution of your immune system, of the nervous system, in that way. And, again, I don't want to say like, I have everything figured out here. There's a bunch of researchers that are thinking along these lines, and there's probably a lot more to it than just that. But I'm just saying it as my own personal interest and something I found fascinating and something I found correlations on.
I just got a good question. I think Nicole may have a question, but I want to jump in here because when you told me that with Kit Green, I said, oh, they know. Because the question is always, what does the black ops, what does the government actually know? Do they understand this kind of stuff? So yeah, it's true what you say. There's the people who believe, and there's the people that know. The people that know, that's why I say the people who've had the experience, they know. Don't tell me like my 2 experiences. Don't tell me I know what I experienced. It's like someone showed it to you before, and then you saw it again. You went, oh yeah, I remember. And it's like that feeling where you know for sure it is real. So when I heard that sort of, and I heard it was Kit, but I asked John. I said to John Burroughs, I said, so did you do it? And he said, yeah. I said, did it work? Yeah, I changed things. He said, yeah, it worked. It's like, and it's sort of like, oh shit. So what do you think? You bumped, into these guys without giving any names. Do you think that they understand this? Because when you look at the thing, it's still the disclosure, let's prove UFOs exist. And we got these little pieces of metal and stuff. And yet you hear these things where they know the experience you've had. They know what it's all about, that it's more this sort of a interdimensional spiritual thing where there's these beings and the lady and all this kind of stuff. So what's your interpretation of what do they know in terms of the guys that you chase and you're trying to listen to? Do they actually understand this, that this is where it's at and it's not about the the crafts and the nuts about, or even John Alexander? There was a story that he said to Sid Goldberg, asked him in the parking lot. He said, he kept asking about UFOs, and John got really upset and he said, it's not about the UFOs, it's about the portals. And he got in his car and drove away mad. So
Yeah.
you hear that and you wonder, like, what do these guys actually know? What do you think?
It's kind of all of the above. I mean, you definitely want to study what you can study, even in a materialistic way, even if you know that's not the ultimate answer. But I mean, a number of these people, I mean, they know, they get it, in one way or another, but you still have to do the work, right? It's like in math, like you might know the answer just like this, but you have to show your work. And there's a lot to gain from showing your work in that way, because you're going to bump into other discoveries. So I think they get it. They get the big picture, but I'm sure that they want to know why, right? Why,
you don't hear them talking about it. Like Gary Nolan's an experiencer, Eric Davis is an experiencer. Hal Puthoff's son had a big sighting in Phoenix right after the Phoenix lights, which indicates that maybe Hal is an experiencer. And you get all this, and it's almost like maybe you can answer this at the same time about the mission thing. I mean, are they on a mission? Are you on a mission? Is this all sort of some big chess player that's putting these pieces together and they're moving people around and stuff like that? And because Gary Nolan is the one that impresses me the most, is that this guy's a full-blown experiencer. I mean, he's got all these ways of tapping into the knowledge and stuff like that. And yet when he talks, you don't hear him talking too much about it. That's why I want to talk to you. But yours is, I think there needs to be more talk about this sort of weird part of the experience that shows that it may be much more than the sort of what the people on the street may think, like, or your friends, or people think, when you go to a UFO conference, that you and I are sitting there and we're exchanging photos of flying saucers and stuff. And it's never, when you get to there, it's like, what is God? How does the universe work? That's what people are always ends up talking about within about 15 minutes is what the hell's really going on here?
Well, and that's why J. Christopher King and I are doing these conferences, right? And we're, we have Jeffrey Kripal there, right? We have these kind of people there. We had Mitch Horowitz, Dr. Gary Nolan, because that's what these people are really doing, right? Like we see all the UFO research and stuff out there, but the conversations they're having behind the scenes, they do talk about all the stuff we would assume they would, crash retrievals and materials and all the effects on the body and probably national defense stuff and stuff like that as well. But, again, in secret, they have this invisible college and they're talking about all this kind of stuff too, synchronicities and consciousness. Right. So, we're putting it out there on the forefront.
Talk about your conferences. Talk about what you're doing and what you're planning to do in the future. People may not know that and that's the first, I give you credit for a lot of stuff, but there used to be the New Jersey conference, but on the East Coast, there's nothing. You go to California, every town's got a UFO conference, but on the East Coast, this is sort of like the first big event on the East Coast of the United States for years, decades even.
Yeah, and that's part of why we're doing it, is because there is nothing over here on the East Coast, especially in New York and New York City. Like there's so much potential, not even location, but just like, New York is, I don't want to argue with people over whatever, but it's progressive in ideology. We're the melting pot. We have, people from all over the world constantly in and out of New York City. And it's, so that's, having it in New York City, I think and I don't have to fly across the country to go somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
But, the idea of these conferences and we have, it's called Inquire Anomalous, but the two events have been called an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon. And, that's showing that there's both. You have the phenomenon and you have the anomalous experiences. And they're kind of one and the same thing. And, at the conferences, we've had people talk about consciousness, but, we have also had people there like Christopher Mellon and Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal. So, these type of conversations, I believe, is where the conversation should be. I think that, a lot of these people have been having these conversations in the background about consciousness and synchronicities and how it intersects with the phenomenon and the nature of reality, which is really what's going on here. Because, I've said a few times, the UFO is a bridge between physics and metaphysics, because you have a physical object that can be tracked on radar, that you can get on gun camera footage, but it's demonstrating principles of what we would consider metaphysics, of teleportation and psychic phenomenon, mind reading, telepathy, psychokinesis, and all these other incredible things that just completely change the way that we would look at physics if it was acknowledged officially. So, and that's I think kind of what we're doing with the conferences. We're having these kind of conversations, and again, ATIP slide 9, kind of says it all. It says what was considered, I forget the exact terminology that they use, but what was once like unknowable is now quantum mechanics or something. Yeah. It says it on the bottom of the slide 9. And again, if you read slide 9, it's like all the, the cognitive human interface and transmedium travel, and it talks about psychotronics, influencing world leaders and all these kind of things, like remote influencing. So you have all these different things going on. And I think now that we have a level of confirmation where, and I believe we're going to get a lot more soon, where UFOs are real, they're real. And eventually we're going to get into the conversation of that they represent non-human intelligence, that, this is where the conversation needs to start going. It's not just this UFO. Yeah. The UFO is the catalyst for this awakening into the idea of consciousness and those kind of.
Are you a messiah? Not a messiah, or like, is that part of your job? Is you had the mission thing? I always ask people.
I mean, I've had it. I've had this kind of mission thing for, a very long time. I'm just.
Is it to put out the message we're putting out today? Is that what your sort of the mission is? It's not about so much the sighting thing. That may be a stepping stone, but they want people to know this other aspect that you had, that I've had, that this idea that it's something else. It's something way bigger than what you think it is. It's your reality is, or as they told me, you haven't got a clue how it works. You haven't got a clue. You think you know how it works, and they were just like really upset with me about how it's way bigger than what people think it is. So you're talking about this sort of idea today, that the same thing that I'm trying to get people to see, that they don't really see, and you're putting it out. So that's part of what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm doing everything that I'm doing, and I have been for years. And somebody who put it beautifully was the late Dr. John Mack, with the passport to the cosmos, talking about how one of these, having this experience is your passport to the cosmos, to realize that reality is way greater than you could have ever imagined. And somehow this, object, this UFO, is able to be that bridge or that stepping stone to the greater reality, because it opens up all the other avenues, and it anchors it in physical reality with its existence.
Yeah. Or you take Gary Nolan says, I'm interested in the 5% that fall outside the bell curve. Like you point out to a student, why is that there? Why is that over there? And it's the anomaly. So you're looking at the anomaly, which leads to the Nobel Prize, because you're outside the puzzle pieces, and you're figuring, if the reality was the way people say it is, this stuff wouldn't be happening. So there's something going on here, and that's where you progress. And so I guess it's a thing where you and I you do what you can, and you're inspired to study it because you're trying to figure it out. Same, you become obsessed. You can't leave it alone. Your family thinks you're crazy. Everybody around you thinks you're sort of like obsessed with this thing. But it's something that once you're down the rabbit hole, people don't understand that part of it as well, is that it absolutely flips your life right upside down.
Yeah. And I've been, ultra fortunate that my family was there for a number of these experiences, and they had gotten to witness extraordinary things. One other event I'll just talk about really quickly, because it was another really incredible event that because, a lot of times, even after those experiences, I would go out, look at the sky and be like, come on, guys, did this really all happen? Am I just, like questioning myself? And then, you get some kind of confirmation. But this one other event, it was a seat, and this is the difference, right? Because those other ones, like, they happened to me. Whether you want to argue that's a soul contract thing, I don't know, possibly, but this was a CE5 in the sense where it was initiated, right? So-called. The hermetic penetrator will argue with me. We like to go back and forth on these kind of ideas and brainstorm. It's like, are we actually initiating anything, or do we just think we are? And that's a fascinating subject. But I was with like a family member, and this was the first time that they were going to try CE5. They knew that I did it and I was into it. They knew I had experiences. So we decided, hey, let's do a CE5, and I expressed to them, listen, if nothing happens, don't worry, because, it's not like every single time there's going to be incredible things that are occurring. So just, don't have any expectations. We'll go through the process and I'll teach you how to do it. So we go in this room to do a meditation and contact work protocols, contact modalities, right? So we did that, and this person, when they came out of their meditation, they were like crying almost, and they had this whole experience, and they said to me, to look out for the colors. And I've had a bunch of experiences at this point, and whatever. And I was thinking, I don't know if they actually experienced anything, or maybe this is something they were imagining or whatever, but I'll just go with it, whatever, in the sense where I'm just going to accept that as what their experience was. And I didn't know what to make of it, right? Look for the colors. Okay. So we walk out of the room, and there were my other family members on the couch watching TV. They had the lights off. And one of them says, James, somebody's taking pictures from outside. And I said, what do you mean? They said, there's lights, the flash from the cameras coming into the house. And then I saw it, and the whole, just for a split second, the whole thing lights up, like ultra bright. And they only saw that because they had the lights off and they were watching a movie. So they saw, this is like about 9 p.m. at night. So it's completely dark, and it's actually June of 2010, June 2010. And so instantly I'm like, holy shit, that's got to be them. So I run outside, and on my way out, I grab a laser, which I recommend nobody ever use a laser during contact work. But I'm just stating it as a fact here. Don't use lasers. They're dangerous, and they're not toys. You can get a lot of trouble with the FAA. They're illegal. You could be banned $11,000 and go to jail. So don't use them. But I happened to grab a laser because this was before this was like a hot topic. And when I got down, I ran down, and I go into the backyard, and I see these two crafts. They're like this, and they're just moving, and, the alleged satellites or whatever, but one goes whoop, and flashes, and the other one goes whoop, and flashes. So they flashed at each other, and they're just going like this. And I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry. Before that happened, I shouldn't have done this, but I did it. I shined the laser in between them. And after I shined the laser in between them, that's when they flashed. And then I'm like, holy shit, okay, this is happening. And the other person who was in the room with me, they were out there with me, and they saw it. So after that, we're looking at the sky, and literally everywhere you look in the sky, there was different phenomena going on, like a solid purple light, but you could see it was attached to a structured craft. Like you could see when it flashed purple, it was, and again, there's no purple lights like that. You could see that there was a reflection when it was flashing off of the structure itself. And there'd be a green one and a red one and flash bulbs and streakers that are making S curves and all this. And this is all going on at once. So I ran inside and I got my other family members. I said, you got to see this. Come on. At this point, they know about the CE5. They've already seen other things. So they come out, and for 30 minutes, there's all this just crazy, all these different phenomena occurring at the same time. And I'm talking hundreds of different things. And I jokingly call this intergalactic initiation, because they made it a point to put on this massive demonstration. And again, even then, I'm taking this literal. I mean, if I think about it now, is like, could there really have been like hundreds or thousands of these different entities there in each one of those orbs? Or is this some kind of consciousness based staged event that they're putting on to make a point?
Are you in New York City at the time? Is this already?
This is in Westchester, New York. So this is upstate New York.
Okay. Is it a pretty crowded area, like in terms of people and stuff?
It's a suburban area.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, there's all other houses on the blocks and stuff. This is kind of like off a back road. So it was a quiet neighborhood, but there's all other houses and cars and stuff. But I've had some pretty incredible ones in New York City, that were not crazy like this, but that were very direct and apparent. And so this whole thing is going on, and everybody's just in awe. And I've been thinking about getting some of them, not on video, but on record, just to talk and share their part of the experience. And so I'll just upload that on YouTube, like them telling their perspective of what they witnessed and experienced. Because again, this was going on for almost a half an hour, and before it ends, right in front of me, less than 10 feet away from me, there's these orbs literally in the yard, like at knee, like mid-level and shoulder level like this. And they're in a triangle. So there's like 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4. Wow. And they're these orbs that are just like, they look like the ones that I described, that ruby red orb that was like imprinted on top of reality, but it's like phasing in and out. And it's almost like if you stared at a light and then looked in the dark, and it's like that. But they were in a perfect triangular structure of these ones were yellow. And again, I'm having this crazy same kind of thing, like reminiscent of the other one, this crazy Kundalini experience. I'm like ecstatic. I am just like feeling like bliss and compassion and caring and all this stuff. And this was this person's first CE5. Wow. And that's something that, I think even if people went out to do CE5 for 20 years, it's just dumb luck that had occurred. I really don't talk about this stuff, even within the CE5 community so much, because I don't want somebody to have an expectation of that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Number one, because there's rare occasions where just like, you just get lucky, just whatever the stars align, and there it is. And
why around you? I mean, like, are they recharging you because you had the event? You're doing the job. You're out, exploring. And why do they get more sightings? I always talk about this thing with the theory of wow. Like, why did they have lights on? And so the question when I first saw it is like, what the hell's it doing? It's just flying along. So what do you think was going on? Why is it?
Again, even after all of these events, but even after this event for weeks, I'm having this kind of download, and it's taking me. Wow. And you have to go through a whole process of integrating the whole experience. Even like 1 week, 2 week, a month, 2 months later, there's different things that you are still integrating from that experience and gaining insights from. So that's kind of one aspect, where it's like you get the download, but you have to like go through the files, and understand everything and what have you. But also I think, and this would get into Jacques Vallée's cultural effects, is I think it's like a reinforcement. Yeah. Because even just a few weeks ago, and I can only, there's only a few people that I can really talk about this stuff with. I mean, I could talk to anybody about it, but there's just like, when you're having this kind of stuff semi-frequently, and there's only a few people you can really tell that are just not going to be like eventually like, oh, come on again. Like, they're just going to assume you're making it up or what, I don't know, whatever. I mean, some people, they're just like, what can they do with that? Right. But it's like, you kind of want to talk about it because it happened. And even just in the past several weeks, I had 3 different experiences, one each week, where, one, I was like, I did a meditation earlier in the day, but it wasn't connected in an apparent way to what happened. So I get home from work and it's like late at night and it's a perfect clear sky. And this is about a month ago. And I look in the sky and I just ask, in my mind, I project out, am I on the right track with everything that I'm doing? And within 2 seconds, this brilliant white orb appeared less than 50 feet away from me, and it squiggled and it left a trail, just like if you look at those old Dorothy Ezat videos.
Oh yeah,
like the photographs, it looked just like that within this small section. And that I was like, okay, that was it. That's like my confirmation, right? But there's still other non-local things going on in consciousness, probably from that. And I also talk about that you're having this continuous contact because it's an entrainment. And if you know about the principle of entrainment, it's like, if you have and one example of it is if you have a bunch of these clocks with this, with the pendulum, and eventually they will sync. Even if they're all at different rates, eventually they're going to sync. So one of my theories or suspicions is the continual contact is your consciousness is in training with theirs. Okay. Because it's not just that they're thinking differently, they're operating on a different level of being. And that's like very Zen. It's not just the way you're thinking about something or perceiving things, but your state of isness, right? Yeah. Just your, what you are. And I believe that during these continued contact experiences, you're slowly being entrained, maybe to be able to better interact, perceive, or even, work in an operational way, kind of, so to speak.
You think that your yoga and meditation put you sort of in the zone where you sort of lit up and they can sort of match up with you? They can see that you're sort of glowing more than the average guy or whatever.
I had experiences even when I was a little kid. And again, I don't know if that's the same thing as the UFO phenomenon per se. And we can get into, again, retro causality, right? Yeah. But when I started having those 3 series of experiences that I talked about earlier, I was meditating for like 3 to 4 hours a day at that point. Yeah. Does that have something to do with it? Very well could be.
Wasn't Greer meditating? Wasn't he a meditation teacher when he had his first encounter on the hill or something?
He had an encounter. He has a few encounters, younger too, that he doesn't talk about too much, but it's probably in Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge. So he also is somebody, but again, it's weird. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? It just so happens that the people that have these experiences at a young age get involved in meditation or prayer, or, some kind of thing like that. And Dr. Joseph Burks will talk about these prime contactees, where it's like they're trained by the phenomenon. They have no instructor or parent influence in their life. They just start practicing the stuff on their own. They could go out and get a teacher, but they take the initiative themselves to start doing this work. So I don't, that's to the point where it goes beyond what
they're
I can
connected
fathom.
Though. Which causes which, but they seem to be, there's a connection there, which is where I was so impressed when I heard that Kit Green or whoever had said, talked about meditation and yoga, is like, oh, they understand. They know it's.
I'll tell you though, I think that, and this is my own opinion, I think that people who are experiencers or abductees or anybody in their life who's dealt with trauma, it could be very helpful to practice meditation. Even meditation itself can, there should be a disclaimer on all this stuff. I know my friend Daniel Ingram from the Emergent Phenomena Research Consortium would say this, and I agree with them, that like you could just start practicing meditation and awaken stuff that you might not have, wanted to in the first place. So, disclaimer on that. But if you're somebody who's already had these experiences, in my experience, meditation has helped me be able to not cling to the experiences as actual fact. You can be more grounded. You can be more analytical. You can be a bit more detached, which can help you in a number of ways in this kind of thing. It can also help you to integrate things. It can help you have more control, so to speak, over the experiences where, like, again, if you want to go out and initiate the contact or whatever, if you're well-trained in meditation, it's probably going to be easier for you, or if you have some kind of encounter that maybe you feel is unpleasant, the meditation practice can help you work through it better. Wow. So there's a lot of key components there where I think that meditation, and also, again, if you're into prayer, use that. There's all these different modalities. There's no right one, like, oh, this is the original one or whatever. There, whatever works and whatever is skillful and useful, use it. So meditation in that case has been very helpful, and it can be a very useful tool for a number of things.
Yeah. And the trauma thing you mentioned, I did that in the contact modalities, where you find 37% of all experiencers have had a near-death experience, 80% have had out of body experience, and the trauma seems to be something that almost like it elevates you or puts you in a different dissociated state.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, I don't want to get into it, but I mean, maybe this is part of my experiences. When I was young, I experienced trauma, viscerally, and it forces you to be able to detach, and
dissociate,
and again, for better or worse, right? For some people, that could not be good, right? So you have to be aware of that. So I think that there is a connection too between trauma and these kind of anomalous experiences. And there's a whole, like, we're talking about the UFO and the contact stuff now. I've had a ton of other experiences that have to do with other crazy stuff. We'll talk about that another time.
Wow, we do. We have a series here, man. Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say, even next time I call you on the phone, because
but I think we should be, to me, we put it out to people, because you'll have people that'll come to you and say, oh, me too. And they'll sort of validate these different parts. Like, that's where I was so interested in talking to you. I didn't realize you had this extent. I knew, because the way you were talking, I knew you had a lot of stuff that you weren't really talking about. It was in the background. It was the stuff I like to get interested in and listen to. And when you hear that stuff, you just go like, wow, it does it. Even hearing your stories, you say, like, how magnificent is the universe? And that is the number one thing to me that has come across to me, is what they told me is, you have not got a clue. You think you understand what's going on. You haven't got a clue. And that's what you get when you get this experience. And listening to you today, it's like you're picking up these aspects that may seem strange to people, but to people who are experiencers, we know this is real. And it just shows that almost like, was it Einstein or whoever said, the world is not only more magnificent than you think, it's more magnificent than you could ever imagine. And that's what comes across is that out of the 5%, the stuff that's outside the bell curve is this stuff that the anomalous stuff shows you that the world is not the place you think it is. And it's almost like and I think you maybe would agree that we live in the biggest story of all times, and that we got to live in this, we got to understand. And most people are walking around lives of quiet desperation. They're totally asleep. They don't even know what's going on. And you and I get to play in this sort of understand this thing, and you're just sort of trying to get the next piece and you're trying to put together, because it's just so interesting.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I mean, again, for me, it's like a mission at this point. And but in regards to people who are really interested in the consciousness and stuff like that, I want to give a shout out to my friend Exo Academian, who has the podcast Point of Convergence. he does an excellent job of kind of like narrating and guiding people through all these different integral approaches to the consciousness, the phenomenon, near-death experiences, and a ton of stuff. So shout out to him. He was at one of our conferences. He's on a kind of like retreat thing right now, but you should have him on and
I'd
talk
love
to him
to.
sometime.
That's the part that sort of just inspires me, that there are people who are doing this kind of stuff, because that's where it's all going to end up. There's no doubt in my mind that's where it's all going to end up.
Yeah, that's and I was just going to say is, it's I can sit here and talk to you about this, and you can understand it to some degree, but as it's I hint at it sometimes because it's not easy to talk about, because the thing is, like, okay, like I'm a UFO researcher, so you could release this and upload it, and now there's going to be 1,000 people that think I'm full of shit, basically. and the thing is, I get it. I completely understand it. And I never expect anybody to understand this if they have not experienced it for themselves.
But you are in this day and age, it's less sort of Rodney Dangerfield than it was in the 1970s. Like, you can talk to Will, who's Nicole's kid, and he'll say, this is great. I mean, those kids will not object to any of this. It's the old people. It's the old idea. Max Planck says, ufology and science advance one funeral at a time. Is that that you're sort of on the leading edge, and that the new generation is going to pick this up and run with it. And it's the old people. I just find it so fascinating that you're telling these stories, and to give people the credit. I think that a lot of people behind the scenes, these we call them the Avery people, or the Invisible College, or whatever, they understand this stuff. They understand that that's where Jim Semivan says, there does not even appear to be any dots there. Forget about put the dots together. It's like that we're that far behind everything. So we got all figure flying these stuff around. But when you've had experiences like you're experiencing, or stuff that I've experienced, there's no way. There's absolutely no way. This is not the government. This is not anybody else. This is just like, you just go like, how the hell did they do that? It's just like, wow.
Yeah, but I would like to say that I think the new generation of researchers are way more open-minded and way more in tune. Because when I first came on the scene, and I created the first social networking groups for CE5, and I was like, I still do, but I was running them. And back then there'd be so many. Back then it was mostly Facebook, and there'd be so many conversations in different UFO groups where a lot of people were like, oh, well, the bullshit, and that, you can't do that, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that now, but overwhelmingly in the last 12, 13 years, like the new generation of researchers they're like, I could see. I mean, they get the correlation between UFOs and consciousness, that where there was people, years ago, they didn't get it.
Even since 2017, that changed everything. It was sort of like, oh yeah, UFOs exist. And it's sort of like, okay, shove it, because we've been saying this all along. And so now this is the next part of the story. You get that. It changed, to me, it just changed the whole world. I never thought it would happen, but it just changed. It flipped everything upside down. And it was all over. It was game over, game, set, match.
Well, and again, and not for nothing, you have slide 9, and I had, Lou Elizondo on Engaging the Phenomenon for an interview.
Yeah.
And we're talking about CE5, cognitive human interface, and I'm asking him, hey, what is this? And he said, that sounds like your CE5.
Yeah.
And it's on an ATIP, briefing slide for the Pentagon. Yeah. Right. So, but, just like with what happened in 2017, I think we're going to get another such event to occur publicly that is going to rival that. And no doubt that Leslie Kane, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper did a fantastic job getting out there, but I don't think everybody's work is done. I think we're going to receive more, revelations in that regard of the reality of UFOs as, real objects. And, and again, I don't want to bring it back to the materialism and objects, but, the UFO reality.
Nicole has a question, but I just want to jump one. I'll give you credit for one other thing that really upsets me. And that was that I put out the Wilson leak, got it out on the internet. And then you and these other people exposed that all these people knew all along. And I'm going, oh my God, they all knew. And it's like, and so that was one of the things that you did that really moved it, that really annoys me. It's, and I'll tell you right now, there's a DIA document that I was about to be given 20 years ago, and I never got it. But there's some stuff out there, and you take a look at the Wilson leak document, and you look at that was where Eric Davis was in 20 years ago. Where is he now? I mean, how much does he know now? So I give you credit that you exposed that. I was just furious when I heard that. I said, these people sat on this thing for 10 years, and it's like, oh, that just annoys me. It's like, sort of like, what profiteth the man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? To me, it's like, it's like everybody knows. It's like, don't tell Cameron, he'll tell everybody. And, or I even tell people when they say I've got a secret, and I say, well, don't tell me, I'm going to tell everybody. It's like, it just annoys me that the people were sitting on this stuff all these years.
Yeah, because, but they understand too, if one of these people just came out tomorrow publicly without any of this language that was drafted, say in 2017, one of these people that just came forward said, you know, there's a UFO, and actually at this base, it would just be a UFO story that would be debunked and you can't prove it and it's gone. But no, they played it smart. They played the long game. They got us where we are now because they did what they did. And they're not going to talk about something unless they believe that they can prove it. And that's why it's interesting to see the people that we see talking now saying the things that they are, because if they're saying those things, they're damn sure they can prove it. You know, like people like Gary and stuff. So when he's saying the things that he's been saying lately, there's a reason for why he's saying that. And we're going to see why.
There you go. Nicole, go ahead.
Oh, Grant, I'm going to remind you that you sat on the Oak Notes for 20 years.
Yeah, well, I that's the thing. I got sucked into one of these agreements where it's like, they people give you something and then they say, oh yeah, don't tell anybody. And it's like, then you're stuck in there. And I always maintained it was sort of like, then you're caught like you were in on a camera with a porn, with a prostitute in a hotel room in Moscow. I mean, they've got you. I mean, once you make an agreement to keep the secret, then they can tell you anything. And so I'd always went against it, but I understand the principle. Like, it's the story that Dolan tells where he says, he talks to the one guy and he says, can you name the 12 guys who are running it? And the guy said, yeah, probably can. And then he says, well, why don't you do it? And he said, because you'd go to the New York Times, they'd print it, I would have to deny it, and nobody would ever talk to me again. And I was warned about that 20 years ago, is the idea that I think what a lot of the secrecy is that you don't want to expose your sources, because once you out somebody, drive over in the bus, nobody talks to you. They say, oh, don't talk to James, man, that guy, he outed this guy, and then nobody talks to you and you lose all your sources. But eventually somebody has to start putting this stuff out. And I think maybe that's part of my job, is people leak it to me. That's what happened, is James came to me. He said, hey, it's your job to get this out. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And then when it happened, when nothing happened, James was all upset. He said, nothing's happening. And I said, I did the job, James. I put it out. That's all I agreed to do. I said, if you want to get it out, you can mail it to people, and that was the thing, it sat on the internet for so long. But so I understand the principle that people are sitting, but you start to wonder, like, how much do these people actually know? And I knew when I talked to Eric Davis in 2000, 2001, in that period, I mean, this guy was like, he's just a fountain that just knows everything. It's just, he's just talking a mile a minute, and he knows all this stuff. And he's very sure that this is the way it is. So it's key to listen to these people especially when you do interviews with them, because you've gotten a lot of stuff out of these people that they've never exposed on any other interview. So congratulations to you for that.
Well, and again, if we're talking about Dr. Eric Davis, I mean, people have heard the things that he said, and he knows more, and he's done more on official capacities, and was given specific tasks to do things that, I don't know if people will ever know or understand right now.
Yeah.
And that's why maybe he would have need to know for certain information, because he was actually given specific tasks to do things, which he completed.
Wow. Right. Nicole, you got a question? I got one more question and then I'm done.
Well, my final question is one that we like to ask a lot of experiencers, Grant. And so, James, if you could go back and change it all or take it all away and make it stop, would you?
No way. No.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't be me, right?
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, because I'm doing a lecture at the conference in Ohio in August, and the question is the good versus the evil. And one of the big things is that 83% of all experiencers, when asked, said, no, don't turn it off. I just want this to continue on. It's this whole idea of the, that when you get and deal with it and have the experiences, and you've been in it long enough, you suddenly realize, oh, no, it's not what I thought it was. It's not what other people think it is. It's, these experiences that you can't even put into words. They're almost like a psychedelic experience that you just can't put it into words. What happened, how it feels, the feeling and the emotion and the love and the compassion and the, gratitude and all that kind of stuff that you go beyond words.
Yeah. To the level of understanding. Yeah, it's transformative, and I think that the UFO reality has the potential to do that on a collective level when we have something like an official disclosure. Not that it's going to become a utopia and it's going to be magic and butterflies, but once you open that, I think that it gives us the opportunity as a civilization to transform in different ways. And I hope we take that chance.
Wow. Now you made me lie. I've got two questions now because you raised this new one here. Yeah.
There's a ton of stuff that we didn't even get.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do another session. I find you fascinating. I think you're one of the up and coming people to listen to. When it comes to disclosure, I think Ross Coulthard mentioned this, and I've mentioned it, is this idea of people being sort of aware of the fact that a lot of this stuff is still going to be locked up in secret projects. Is because they got an immunity doesn't mean they're going to go in front of an open hearing and tell people where the UFOs are and all this kind of stuff. It'll be in closed hearing the same way it is now. I sort of make the joke that we're even farther behind now than we were with Blue Book, because in Blue Book, we knew what the shapes were and we knew what the reports were. When we asked about the shapes in the report this time, they said no classified. So all you're getting is a number, like 144 cases. One was identified, and that's all that came into the public realm. Do you think it will get into the public realm in terms of the classified stuff that Eric Davis will tell and Hal Puthoff and Gary Nolan and people like that?
I mean, definitely, it's definitely within their, I don't want to say their intention, but from what I understand from speaking to some of those different people, is that they want this stuff out, right? To the level that it can be put out in a way where, they're still cognizant of national security. But it's on the agenda is to get the crash retrieval story out, publicly acknowledged, non-human technology within our possession within a number of years. Like that, it's on the agenda to completely do that.
By the guys that are fighting it, or by the guys that control it? Because I think the guys that control it would be still fighting to stop it, right?
Well, from what I understand, that there's people that control it. Some of them are cooperating.
Oh, okay, good.
Not all of them, but so, and that's a really complicated discussion, because you have this, like a Zodiac.
Yeah.
You also have a group, Collins Elite, right? Which these are informal names to describe.
Do you have a code name?
Huh?
Do you have a code name or a bird name?
Me?
Yeah, I think because that's what the Avery did. They all had, it was Bill Moore that did it, but then it sort of, took off, and even Dan Seville gave himself his own bird name. He was the one that the sky was falling. I can't remember what his bird name was, but he gave himself a bird name, and then they started the aquarium. Figured, we wanted the aquarium, and they all got under the aquarium, and they were all fish and stuff. But you have some of these guys who aren't giving their names or whatever. So I just want to make sure you guys don't have sort of a secret group with code names and.
If there is, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
Maybe there's probably one floating around there, but No, but there's different, we have these different factions that, that have different agendas,
which is understandable. Yeah.
For transparency, completely against transparency, limited transparency, even within the same groups. So that's a thing. And I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen. But there are a number of people who want the majority of this stuff out there, the fundamental reality of it, not blueprints to UFO or to crazy weapons, but like just you have the reality of this issue. And now where do we go from here? We don't even know how far we can go because we haven't broached it yet. So like once we figure out we have this much out, okay, things are kind of going all right. How much more can we put out safely and responsibly, and so on? And how is the public going to react to that? Like, I'm pretty sure, part of testing this story of the crash retrieval thing is, okay, if people don't freak out there, if it's not the end of the world, when are we going to start talking about the other intelligences, right? That's the conversation after that, yeah. Right? Not beyond the technology is the intelligence, right?
Did any of your speakers address this? Because this is a critical thing. Like as Jim Semivan says, what you tell your friends, you tell your enemies. This concept about the president describing the fact that he really isn't in charge, that these beings might be in charge, or that there's a spiritual complex thing, and it's not the Christian God, or did any of your speakers address that when you brought in for your conferences?
I don't think they. I mean, maybe
or were they talking disclosure. Was that was
not directly in that fashion? I mean, that'd be a fascinating discussion, though, for sure.
Yeah, to have a panel of people that discuss this issue, because I think it's critical. My last question, and then you can tell us what you've got coming, like in terms of your conferences, your channel and stuff. But my last question is, a lot of experiencers, because I have the publishing company called It's All Connected, and we've helped a number of people. Nancy Tremaine, who was the first abductee before Betty and Barney Hill, did 2 books. We helped people who had stories to get the stories out, because a lot of times we hear the story where Sherry Wild tells a story where she's sitting at the computer and the word program is open. And she said, I don't use a word program. What's your word program open? And she looked and she saw the first 3.5 pages of her story. And she went, oh, no, we're not going there. No way, man. We're not going there. Have you ever gotten the instruction yet to do a book?
I mean, there's no instruction for me to do a book. I mean, I've always wanted to write a book.
There you go. We'll help you. We'll help you. You got a fantastic. I haven't even got to the stuff about how did it start. We just did a couple of encounters, but you have an absolutely fascinating story. I mean, I can see why you're pushing so hard, and why maybe you're having so much success in terms of getting on the map and getting the story out, because you have a very inspiring story that you seem to have a contact, almost like Chris Bledsoe, where eventually you're going to have government guys come to you and they'll say what they said to Jim when they said to Chris Bledsoe when he said, why you coming to me? Why are you here? And then the government guy said, oh, because it appears that they like you. You can talk to them. They don't like us. They don't appear to like us because they won't talk to us. So we've come here to find out, what are they telling you? And I think that may be that's why I see you. It's almost like a Chris Bledsoe, where you have not just a contact of sightings. You've got these, it's almost like you have a more direct contact where you've got these, the higher element experiences, which are what I want to listen to when I want to hear that, because that's what I'm trying to figure out is, how does this all fit together? Because until 2012, I thought it was just, ETs from other planets and stuff. And I went off the edge like you, where I had this experience where it was just like, your life just got flipped upside down. So I really appreciate talking to you. So what have you got coming up in terms of panels, or talk about your show a little bit, and we'll leave it with that.
Yeah, well, again, and just kind of before that, I never wanted, again, my thing is engage in the phenomenon, because I didn't want to make it James Iandoli. I don't want it to be about me.
You're
it's
like
about
the
work.
guy in the Monty Python. I am not the Messiah. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. I'm not the Messiah.
Well, no,
Right?
it's because it's about the work, and if once you focus on a personality,
Well, yeah,
then
exactly.
the whole thing falls apart
Yeah,
because
yeah. I never use my name either in any of my stuff.
you know, well, it's again, so I always focus on the work, and even if I do a book, which I think I'm going to do eventually, but I don't want the whole thing to just be about me or my experiences. I mean, maybe like threaded throughout the book,
Yeah,
because I use my experiences as a guide, as references for my own
yeah,
research. So that's how I would put it into the book. Is okay. It's a like I have a good feeling about this because I have an experience that correlates, that tells me that this is probably the right way to go,
yeah.
kind of thing. So in kind of in that regard. But I have a number of interviews coming up. I have one really dynamite interview that I don't think people are gonna see coming.
Tim Taylor. You got Tim Taylor?
No, 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 no. Um, but that's probably going to be sometime, hopefully early next year. I got some experiencers coming on, and my kind of style, if people haven't realized it yet, is like I don't I don't talk about an interview before I do them. I just put
Yeah,
them out there.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
even if I'm going to have on, Lou or when I had Colum and Georgiana or whoever, I don't announce it. I don't promote it. I just boom, it's up, and people are like, "Holy shit!"
yeah.
It's
It works.
it's
It's a good way to do it.
well, I like to do that for a number of reasons. I that's kind of more my style.
And you got any more events in New York?
We have another Inquire Anomalous conference coming up. I We're gonna make announcements in January, but you know, definitely check out the Inquire Anomalous Twitter, the Inquire Anomalous YouTube channel. We have the talks from the first event up there on YouTube, so anybody can see them. We're going to do that with the second one too. So the one we just had, they will all eventually be freely available on YouTube for everybody to watch.
Wow.
And again, yeah, engaging the phenomenon. Follow me on Twitter, on YouTube. But the next conference is going to be sometime next year, obviously, and it's already. I mean, it's the epitome of the invisible college. I'll just
There you go.
it's good. Yeah, it's gonna be a good one. I don't want to announce who's going to be there yet, because we haven't properly put together the announcement, and I don't want to speak ahead of term. So in January we'll be announcing the next conference.
Okay, so we'll have, maybe once you get it set up, I'll have another interview. Well, you can tell a little bit of your early history, and we can go through that, and then you can tell me some background stories on the people that are coming there and what they told you secretly. we can promote your conference. That's what we'll do.
I
He
mean
hinted, James hinted to me behind the scenes. So I will add to the excitement and say, yes, it's very exciting. If it all comes together, nobody will be disappointed.
There you go. There you go. That's what we want.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is maybe you've gotten a little bit of help from the other side, that, or maybe because people see you as an experiencer, that you're not in it for fame and fortune. You're sort of like me. You get dragged down the rabbit hole, and you're just trying to figure it out, and you're not really, you're not like, all the people who made $1 million from UFOs. So you're just
Yeah,
like,
well, and I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but I can't take credit um for my success in the field, or however you want to call it.
yeah,
In a very kind of like kind of Buddhist philosophy of the 12 links of causation. It's like it's not like I intended all this to happen, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, where the domino effect kind of thing happened, and I'm along for the ride. It's I didn't like master plan any of this, or I'm not like super
that you know of.
skillful.
That you know of.
Right.
If you're a Michael Newton guy like me, you plan most of it. And we
Well,
had a
again,
meeting
that's a
before.
whole-
You don't remember the meeting? It was you, me, and Nicole was there before we got born, and we said we were going to do this interview, and we would you would do conferences in New York, and we'd get YouTube channels, and that's you don't remember that interview or that time we were together?
No, but you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I'm not some great researcher.
You're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. Let me tell you, you're one of the best. I mean, you're doing an excellent job. Let me assure you. I feel
really
good
appreciate,
now that I know that somebody's going to take over, that's going to move it. Because that was a big fear we had years ago. We had a fear like it was just going to die out because there was no young people in the field. I was so glad to see that there was new people that came in, and I don't know what inspired everybody, whether it was the New York Times article or what it was, but suddenly all these new people, young people appeared, and what impressed me was you people can use computers. So it was sort of like our generation. It was all like Stan and I and people. It was all, we were doing all stuff by letter. We'd wait 3 weeks for an answer to a question or whatever and stuff like that. It was like moving. But now you guys all have these computers, and you're doing all these searches, and you know how to search. You know, all these guys know how to search government files, and they're in the back door and stuff like this, and they're pulling all this stuff. I was just so amazed that, especially when they got the K. Randall May, I go like, man, these guys are unreal. They can figure out anything. It was like, holy cow. So yeah, you're doing a good job. Don't worry, you're doing an excellent job, and I appreciate it. I mean, that's all we can do is you put in what you put in what you can put in, and take out only what you need, and that's the way it works. So
yeah, well, and I really appreciate that coming from you, because you're one of my top guys.
Yeah,
like, you know, you, Rich, I shouldn't say Stephen Greer, but his work definitely had a strong impression
but
on
Stephen,
me.
it's always the thing, you got to distinguish between what he says and his personality. A lot of people have got really bad personalities, but in terms of Stephen Greer, I defended him early on because I knew that the Wosley thing had happened, because I had the encounter, and Hal told me to pull an article that I was going to do on it because he didn't want me to embarrass the guy at the Arlington Institute. So I knew the story was real. I knew that Greer was telling the truth and stuff like that. And so I always knew that Greer was telling the truth about, but it you know, when it comes to like putting his role in it, and his the way he deals with people. And I know when I was with him, I mean, he said, "Are you working for Bush?" He was really, you know, like, because I was asking all these presidential questions, and "Are you working for Bush?" He thought I was working for George Bush, and he was a hard guy to deal with, but that's the way it is. I mean, everybody has their things, and the thing is, even if a person's hard to deal with, can you go in there and get the guy's story from him? Ignore all the rest and be nice to him and play his game and go along. That's all it's about. So that's why I said to people, whatever you think of the Invisible College or the Avery group, you listen carefully to them, whether you agree with them or not. Listen carefully to them, because they all know something that you need to know.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of them, they're all right guys. I mean, Gary's an incredibly awesome dude.
Yeah,
I mean, he likes to joke around, and you know, he can throw some stingers. He can throw some stingers, but I mean, he's such a great guy. Really, I can't say enough about him. When, you know, Gary Nolan to me is somebody, he's the epitome of integrity.
Yeah,
and I mean that in many different ways, and there's been many examples where he's proven that to me. You know, because I'm just some random person. He didn't have to cooperate with me or give me the Claudia Putainman story or come out to the conference and be the headline for this, you know, a number of things. And he's always, you know, stuck by his word. And so that's very honorable. And, you know, again, Eric, I mean, he's hilarious. He's always been friendly to me. So.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, there are no accidents, gentlemen, and everything happens for a reason.
That's right. We had the meeting before we were born. I remember it. I remember it clearly.
The reason right now is I have to leave. So I'm going to wrap this up, gentlemen, but we will have a part 2. And I will say thank you, James, and thank you, Grant. This has been a wonderful chat. And
I can hear the helicopter in the background. You're getting on the helicopter and taking off.
It's daily now. I mean, I'm needed.
There you go. Thank you, James, so much.
Soon.
I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure and an honor. I'll speak to you guys soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.